Great. So thank you for doing the interview. Could you begin by telling us who you are and what your role is at the Loyola Free Lunch?
My name is Ev. I have been coordinating the HiFree lunch for the past 2 years, and before that I was working as a cook here. Um, Basically, my roles are coordinating volunteers, making sure that all of the admin work gets done, budgeting, and cooking the food, of course.
Could you tell us what the Hive Free Lunch program is?
So the HiFree lunch program basically serves a free vegan lunch every regularly scheduled school day at the Loyola Hive Cafe in the same space, but just beside the cafe. Basically, our goal is to provide like fresh ingredients, like fresh food made from scratch, for people that maybe don't have access to it because of money or just need some lunch and don't have time to worry about cooking themselves food. Yeah.
So could you describe the mission of the Loyola Free Lunch program?
Well, we are a subset of the Hive Cafe. So the Hive Cafe has its own mission. But for the Hive Free Lunch particularly, it's basically just to serve accessible food to as many people as we can. So we do that by making our food from scratch. And we also try to keep in mind allergens. So our kitchen is nut-free. We always have a gluten-free option. And we try to just make sure that the food is as accessible as possible to the people that want to eat here. And it's basically to just make food accessible and also to create community around food and allow people to be part of the process of making food and making this possible.
Great. So could you describe the economic model of the organization?
Sure. Basically, we started out with funding from just the CSU. The CSU is on contract with the Hive Cafe to provide, it's approximately $42,000 a year for the Hive to operate the Hive Free Lunch program. And then that about a year ago wasn't quite enough because I was operating alone as a full-time employee and then having one part-time assistant that I wasn't able to pay as much as I was making. And for a non-hierarchical setting, that doesn't really make sense. So I was able to get some grants to be able to top up our funding for that year. And then there was an ASFA referendum, and we secured a 10-cent per credit ASFA fee levy. So it's the arts and science faculty students that provide 10 cents per credit towards the Hive Free Lunch. And we just started getting that this past year. So that has allowed us to maintain having 2 full-time coordinators that make the same amount of money per hour and have the same amount of hours. So we work interchangeably. And then we pay for our food. So right now we're not getting free food because of logistical reasons, but also because the organization that provides many of these types of organizations free food, Moisson Montréal, didn't have space for us right away when we were able to start setting it up. So likely we'll start having that in fall of 2017. But right now we're paying for our food. In general, we spend about 73 cents per student per day on food, and it comes to about 63 cents per serving served, which is pretty good. But a lot of our budget goes to food right now, and we're trying to make that shift to be able to get more free food so that we're able to spend more money on organic ingredients rather than having to get the cheapest ingredients available to be able to continue to serve the growing amount of people that we do serve.
So could you tell us about how decisions are made at the Loyola Free Lunch program?
Absolutely. So the Hive Free Lunch program operates within the Hive Cafe. So we have the same board of directors as the Hive Cafe. our AGM is the Hive Cafe's AGM. There's 2 HiFree lunch coordinators, and we work with the administrative coordinator of the Hive Cafe. Basically, we mutually support each other, the Hive Cafe and the HiFree lunch program. We have completely separate budgets, but myself and the other free lunch coordinator are in charge of daily managing the operating budget and ensuring that we come in under budget and managing all the daily tasks. But as for like major decisions, any of those decisions would go through the board of directors or the HR committee or any of those committees for the Hive Cafe. For the most part, if we want to have something done, like hire someone in addition to the 2 coordinators, or any major decision that can't be made on a daily basis, we would, maybe ask one of the Hive Cafe coordinators if it's something that we can just do or if it needs to be brought to a committee. And then from there, we'll bring it to the correct committee or directly to the board of directors to get approved. And then once it's approved, we would just implement it.
So could you describe the division of labor at the Loyola Free Lunch Program?
So there's 2 coordinators, myself and Emily. We're both in charge of making sure that everything happens. And then we have maybe like a group of 50 to 60 volunteers that come in and out. Some come every day, some come once a week, some come once a month. It's kind of a surprise every day who's going to come. And then we also have a stage that comes in on Tuesdays from Safe Air Riverdale. That's a program for students that are having a hard time graduating high school. So they do a work placement for these students to help them graduate high school and be able to integrate into the workforce. So they come here and learn kitchen skills and how to work in a kitchen and listen to people. This helps us a lot with getting all of our prep done, because we do prep after lunch for the next day. So they will do most of our prep for the rest of the week so that in the afternoons we're not struggling to cut 100 pounds of onions and potatoes before leaving. So this saves us a lot of labor. Volunteers will help with cleaning, prep work, cooking, and serving food. Emily and I don't serve food because at that point we also need to be cleaning up and prepping for the next day. So if we don't have any volunteers when we're about to serve lunch, we always make a call out and let people know we have no volunteers right now. If nobody volunteers, you can't get the food. Because if we weren't able to do that, then we wouldn't be able to clean up in a time that would allow us to continue to pay for food and labor costs. So that's one way where we always make sure that somebody volunteers to do that. And we let volunteers skip the line and get seconds before everyone else and have free coffee. So there's an incentive to doing it and people really enjoy it. I think that a lot of people are a little skittish about starting to volunteer though, and will need the little extra nudge. A lot of people when they come to volunteer for serving will say that they've wanted to volunteer for the whole year, but they never did. So we get a lot of new volunteers that way. And then beyond that, that takes care of most of our daily tasks. And then in terms of administrative work, Emily and I do that here and there between cooking and cleaning. And then in terms of bookkeeping and accounting stuff, all of that gets filtered through the Hive Cafe administrative coordinator, and the HiFree lunch pays for the Hive Cafe coordinator to do that work for us. And we work alongside that coordinator to make sure that it gets done. And that's pretty much all the tasks.
Okay, great. So could you tell us the history of the Loyola Free Luncheon from its inception until what it's become today?
So before the Hive Free Lunch, there was the Loyola Luncheon in this space. And then the Hive Cafe had been trying to start up for a long time. And the Hive Cafe started, I believe, in fall 2014. And at that point, the Loyola Luncheon contract was up, and the CSU stipulated that the Hive Cafe, in order to have access to this space, provide a free vegetarian lunch in place of the Loyola Luncheon to fill that gap that was being taken out. So the Loyola Luncheon was significantly smaller than what we do here. It was a group of a few people who ran that through a contract with the CSU, and they were providing meals for probably 50 to 70 people. And then when the Hive Cafe took over the space, the CSU and the Hive Cafe signed a contract to provide the Hive Free Lunch program to students at Loyola. In the first year, I was hired in November of that year, and we served an average of 150 students a day. I think at the beginning it was pretty slow, and then as it started picking up, the coordinator realized that she would need more help. So I started working part-time, and then the following year, I became the Hive Free Lunch coordinator. And the previous coordinator moved on to work in the Hive Cafe kitchen, which is the original job that she was hired for. And at that point, I was trained on how the Hive Free Lunch worked. So it made sense to allow me to become the coordinator and oversee the next progression. My goal was really to see it grow, because I think it's an amazing program, and I think it was really something that was needed here. Especially as a vegan, being on Loyola in the past when I was a student, I really had no food options here, besides like walking to Second Cup and getting a latte, which is not very filling or nutritious. So my goal was really to make it grow and make the food more accessible. So that year we started having a nut-free kitchen, started having a lot more gluten-free options, and made the whole program vegan so that people wouldn't have to worry about cross-contamination with cheese. We also started serving a lot more people, so it just made sense to start making it vegan, because all the animal products that were being used were really expensive. So it allowed us to cut costs of the food down by a lot. And in that year, I raised money by applying for CCSL and for a grant from ASFA to be able to get Emily a full-time position as the second Hive Free Lunch coordinator. I think that year we served about 230 people on average a day, and it was getting extremely exhausting to be the one coordinator all the time. So when Emily started working full-time, we both were working 4 days a week. I would work Monday to Thursday, and she would work Tuesday to Friday. And this allowed for the 2 slowest days to have one coordinator, and the other days, which we were serving like 300 people a lot of the time, to be covered by both of us. And then this year we've served almost 265 people on average, with our highest being 420, and that's not including seconds. So we've really grown throughout the past 3 years that we've been open. And I think we'll continue to grow from here.
So could you tell us a little bit about the procurement that you do for the free lunch program?
So right now, because we are purchasing our food, we use a supplier that would supply vegetables and fruits to like restaurants. It's called Canam. most of our fruits and vegetables aren't organic because we can't afford to feed as many people as we do and have organic and local produce. But I think that we've tried to prioritize like having people access food over like the organic and local labels. We also get some food from City Farm School. In the fall when they're producing, we get a lot of kale from them. They grow garlic for us as well. And we also get sprouts from the greenhouse. We shop at Au But. It's a restaurant supply store in St. Henry. And there's another Montreal company called Click that we get other dry foods from. And that's pretty much all the areas that we get items from right now.
Okay, great. So could you describe what kind of food that you're serving here at the Lila Free Lunch Program?
We serve an enormous range of food. We don't have any fixed schedule for our meals. We make our menus 1 week in advance, and often we'll be scratching our head to try to think of what to make. So sometimes we'll ask volunteers what they want to eat, or think of what vegetables are in season at the time. We make lentil loaf, soups, tomato bisque. Every last day of free lunch we make pizza with a salad. That's one of people's favorite meals. We've made lasagna, we've made pot pie, we often make BLTs, Caesar salads, all kinds of everything, basically.
Could you describe some of the events and activities that you host outside of the free lunch?
So we have a volunteer orientation. Generally, we'll have one per year. Sometimes if we're running low on volunteers, we'll have one in the winter as well. So normally it'll happen in September, and it'll just be a small group of volunteers that are curious about the free lunch program, but maybe want more information before they start volunteering. So we give them basic rundown of kitchen safety, knife skills, and anti-oppression politics for working in the kitchen in order to like keep the kitchen as a safe space for people. Generally, maybe 8 people come to that, and we'll serve brownies to incentivize people to show up and break the ice between like here and the kitchen. Then we hold a volunteer appreciation party at the end of the fall semester and at the end of the winter semester. In general, about 35 of our volunteers from that semester will come, and we'll serve them a meal that they didn't have to cook, and we'll get them to play games with each other. And we really see the volunteers that have been working together like form friendships and get to know each other, and it's really an amazing thing. There's so much like community that's built in that kitchen, so it's great to see it just like connect through the volunteer appreciation parties. We've also held hot sauce workshops and a few other workshops here and there, but those are kind of planned when we decide, or when somebody asks us to hold one. So we have a HiFree lunch hot sauce that we produce that is a recipe that we came up with. We also sell it to the Hive Cafe. And a lot of people have become kind of addicted to it. So occasionally we'll put on hot sauce workshops so that people can make it at home and, continue to have it all summer.
Wonderful. That sounds really great. Could you talk about some of the partnerships that you have? You could talk about maybe some on campus, but if there's also off campus, then that would be great too.
So obviously we have the Hive Cafe and the CSU from our funding, but we also have the greenhouse and City Farm School. We buy sprouts from the greenhouse, and we buy a lot of produce from City Farm School when they're producing. And City Farm School will grow garlic for us during their season, and then in exchange we'll cater a meal for them, and they also use our kitchen during the summer. So we have a contract with them that they can use the kitchen while we're not using it, so that their workshops for their program will be able to be in a kitchen, and they can transform food, and they can have a nice space for their interns to use.
So could you describe some of the long-term and short-term goals of the Lila Free Lunch program?
I think one of the goals that I've had is just to continue to see it grow. We've still had a 15% increase from last year, and the year before that we had a 50% increase from the year before. And every time more people come, it's just amazing to see. So I'd like to continue to see it grow. There's so many people on this campus that, are all spread out. And I think that what we've really been able to do is create community here, because there's not really other places where people congregate and share food at this campus. So it's really amazing to see, and I'd like to see that continue. Other things are setting up that partnership with Sodhexo-marriot, and this will allow us to spend less money on produce, and it'll allow us to get more ethically sourced, organic, local food for the rest of the food that we get. Other goals would be to maybe hold more workshops and engage more of the community here. And also to get people to really understand the labor that goes into cooking, and to allow them to appreciate that labor, so that people, aren't just coming here, getting a plate, washing or not washing their dish and leaving. We have a lot of volunteers that will come even just once. And I think that's a really great experience for somebody. If somebody just shows up once and sees how it's done, I think they still get a really nice image of what the organization is, and it helps out a lot. So I think that a big goal of what we do is allowing people to see that when their mom is cooking for them, or when their partner is cooking for them, or when they're just heating up some food that somebody prepared for them, it's a lot of labor that's invisibilized and often feminized in our society. And I think that we're trying to show people that it's intense labor, but it also can be fun, and you can do so much with it. And so we're trying to get people interested in cooking, but also to appreciate the people in their lives that cook for them and do that labor.
So could you talk about some of the strengths of the Lila Free Lunch program?
Definitely serving and making a lot of food at a time. We serve a lot of food in a very small space, and also building community here. I think I've already spoken about this, but I think a huge strength is people coming in to the kitchen, or just coming into the space and getting connection with other people. I find that a lot of our volunteers are the introverted folks on this campus that want to contribute but are shy to talk to people. So they come into the kitchen, and it's a quieter, safer space that they can just, contribute in their own way, but at the same time be part of a larger community. So I think that it's really become a community space where people can feel part of something, but also feel like they're part of the food movement, and feel like they're working towards caring for the people around them. Great.
What about some of the weaknesses of the organization?
I would say the biggest weakness is the physical space. We're currently inaccessible to wheelchair users. There is a sign downstairs that says it's wheelchair accessible, because the first floor of the building is wheelchair accessible, but it isn't. And I know that we don't have an elevator in this building because of the electrical capacity of this building. But at the same time, as somebody who cares deeply about accessibility and folks with disabilities, I think that it's really the biggest weakness of this program, because we don't provide accessible service in that way. And we do say that if somebody has a disability and isn't able to come up the stairs, they can call us and we'll bring them down food, but it's not accessible. Like having somebody be like specialized and like brought food downstairs where there's nowhere to sit and have food, or to just like have a nice place to have food, it's not the same as accessing the service. So I think that that's the biggest weakness of the program, really.
Great. So what does the organization bring to the Concordia community?
I think that it brings like inspiration and motivation around food to Loyola. From what I had seen, there wasn't so much of that before. And as much as the Hive Cafe is doing amazing things to help inspire that in people, I think that we've been able to pull a lot more people to this building and into thinking about what they're eating by having this service. And it really allows people like to think about what they're eating, but also, you know, take a bite of something and not be like, ugh, vegan food, but be like, whoa, this is actually really good. And then we'll see people, you know, taking photos of the ingredient list because they're trying to make it at home. And we'll have people asking us to make recipe books all the time. So I think that we've really brought to Loyola a sense of like interest in cooking food and interest in making different food than people are just used to eating every day.
Great. So could you describe to us a day in the life of a coordinator of the Loyola Free Lunch Program?
So in general, myself and or Emily will arrive at 9 o'clock. At that point, we'll open up the kitchen. If it's a Monday, we'll turn on all the pilots for the stove and put on onions. Generally, most things we cook have onions in them, so that'll be the first thing we do right away. And then we look at what we're serving for the day. Everything will have been prepped the day before. So we'll look at what we're serving for the day and see, you know, what needs to go in, or if there's like something that will take a really long time, like cooking rice. So if we need to cook rice, we'll put that in the oven right away. Or if there's like 2 cases of romaine that needs to be washed, that takes a really long time. So we'll start on that right away. Anything that'll take a lot of hours, that's the first thing that will get done. And then we'll start like setting up spaces for volunteers to come in, and also just organizing things to be able to prepare lunch on time. Generally, volunteers will start coming in around 10, 10:30, sometimes 11:30 or 12. It depends on the day. So somebody could get there even before we get here as well. So it can really be like a wild card of who will show up and when. And then around 11:30, we have to make sure that all the food is going to be ready in an hour. Start seasoning the food, you know, rotate whatever's in the oven, and we'll have a volunteer in general set up the front. So we have 2 sinks in the front of the serving area, and those are where the students will clean their dishes. So we have dishes that we provide for people so that everybody doesn't have to bring Tupperware. And there's 3 stages so that people can, you know, soap up your dish, rinse it, and then sanitize it. So all that needs to be set up in the drying racks. And then while that's being done, we'll finish cooking the food, seasoning it, and then the plates will be moved over to the serving area, and we'll start setting out the food at like 12:15. And then we'll write the chalkboard list of ingredients, and 12:25-ish, myself or Emily will go out and announce. So we just announce basically what the food is going to be, if there's wheat in any of the food, we'll announce that, we always need volunteers and that there's a donation bin. So basically the ways that people can help out the program if they wish, and just describe how to clean your dish and what duties you need to do around here. And then we'll just say, have a good lunch. And then the volunteers will serve the food. We count every day how many people we serve. So we have a clicker, and one of the volunteers serving the lunch will click for every person that we serve first and every person that we serve seconds on a separate clicker. And then in the back, we'll start on prep. So any vegetables that need to be chopped up for the next day, that will still be good the following day. So lettuce we won't chop up the day before, but potatoes, onions, celery, carrots, anything that will stay fresh the next day, we'll start chopping up in the back. We'll start cleaning up from lunch in the back, because depending on the day, if it's a really complicated meal or if it's just really hectic in the back and there's no volunteers, a lot of the dishes or cleaning work can be like kind of pushed aside. So we'll start cleaning up then, getting the kitchen organized, preparing to have the big pots and bowls come back to be washed. And then the prep work will start getting done. The food will end at around 1:30. If there's still a line at 1:30, we'll allow anybody that's waiting for food to get food. And then we'll bring the food in if there's any left. If there's no food left, we'll bring the pots in right away. We serve seconds at 1:15, so we'll announce you can get seconds now, but if there's anyone waiting for firsts, let them go before you. And then people will start doing their dishes themselves. Maybe a volunteer will start drying the dishes that are in the dish racks, and we'll start cleaning up all the pots and finishing up prep and putting everything away. And then, just finishing to clean up the serving area and in the kitchen. And then that'll be pretty much the end of the day on a regular day. And any of the administrative works and stuff like that will be done just when we have time.
Great, thank you. So how could people get involved with the Loyola Free Lunch Program?
The best way to get involved is to volunteer. We're here from every day from 9 o'clock until 3 o'clock. So you can always pop into the kitchen. We also have a volunteer form if you're shy to just show up on a random day, like online, that you can fill out, and we'll email you back and let you know like when you can start and what day. But yeah, just coming back there and talking to us and seeing if we need help is such an amazing help and the easiest way to get involved. Sometimes we need volunteers for other like special events or whatever, but mostly it's just the daily task of cooking, cleaning, and serving. So the biggest help really is when somebody just comes up right before we're serving and notices that we don't have a server and says, "Can I serve?" Because that way we don't have to try to get people who didn't volunteer to come and serve. So that's a really nice way.
So how would someone go about contacting your organization?
There's a few ways. So first of all, our email address is HiFreeLunch, all in one word, @gmail.com. We also have a Facebook page, it's HiFreeLunch, and we have an Instagram, it's also HiFreeLunch. The Facebook and the email get checked pretty regularly, but in the summer, the coordinators don't work anymore. So if you do email, you will get an automated response of nobody's here. Although if you write on the Facebook, we would probably answer because it is connected to the Free Lunch coordinators' personal Facebook accounts because of how Facebook works. Our physical location is on the Loyola campus, the SC building on the 2nd floor. The Hive Cafe itself opens at around 8:30 every day until 4 o'clock, although the space might be open a little later depending on who's closing the space that day. The Free Lunch coordinators will generally be here from 9 o'clock until 3 o'clock. So any regularly scheduled school day that doesn't include the summer school days. So during the fall and winter semester, we'll be here during those times. And that, unfortunately, the Hive Cafe space does close over the summer at Loyola because there's not enough people here over the summer to be able to continue to stay open. So yeah, physically showing up when we're working is an amazing way to get in contact with us, because we can always, chop vegetables while you ask a question if that's what you're after.
So in your opinion, what would be an ideal model for food services at Concordia?
I think that something that could be improved upon is the spaces that are used for like big corporations like Subway, Tim Hortons. There's a lot of spaces on campus that are used for those types of organizations that could be replaced with student-run organizations or community-based organizations or co-ops, just places that would make food more accessible and not be just putting money in the pockets of large corporations that don't do anything for our food systems and degrade our environment. And also the cafeteria, for example, is run by a major food organization, and students at Loyola have to pay for the cafeteria that's downstairs under the Hive Cafe. And often we have vegetarian and vegan students that have to pay for the cafeteria that's downstairs in order to live at the residence. We'll come up here and eat lunch in order to get a wider variety of food, more nutritional food, and like food that has more protein in it, because the food that's sometimes being served doesn't necessarily satisfy all the needs of somebody with an alternative diet. So I think that also if you look at, how much students are spending on the cafeteria in order to live in residence, it's like extreme. So in comparison to the HiFree lunch program, which is still purchasing all of its food at this point, we're only spending 73 cents on ingredients per person and 63 cents on like a serving of food, because some people get seconds, so that's why it's a bit of a different calculation. But we could be creating cafeterias that have alternative food for people that takes into account all the nutritional needs of those people, and not just taking the chicken out of something and being like, here's some potatoes. And I think that because those corporations have the end goal of making a certain few people richer, it really changes the type of food that they make and the prices, really, because I don't have a boss, Emily doesn't have a boss. Like, we are under the direction of the board of directors, but those are volunteers. So we work at an hourly wage, and we just have the goal of creating delicious food for cheap and making people happy by eating that food. So I think that if we were able to have the models of like the People's Potato and the HiFree lunch program and Mother Hubbard's Cupboard taken to a cafeteria setting where we're able to provide a couple different varieties of food and people pay for it, but in accordance to what's being served, it could completely revolutionize the way that people eat here. Because as much as a lot of people like to say that, their parents are going to be paying for the cafeteria or whatever, the people in residence parents are paying for it, a lot of times that just makes it inaccessible to people that don't have the ability or don't have the means for their parents to be able to pay for it, or don't have any financial support in that way. So I don't know the last time I was able to cook a 75-cent meal at home. And really the quantity of food is what allows us to bring down the cost of food. So if we were able to secure something like a cafeteria in that way, where people pay prices that are relative to what's being served, rather than having a like big business corporation make money off of students that are going into debt. It would completely change the food system and allow people to actually have delicious food that like nourishes their bodies, rather than just like beats up their bank account and that they're not getting everything they need from it.
Great. So what advice would you give to a student who came to Concordia for the first time that wanted to get involved in the food movement here?
I think the best ways that I have seen is like volunteering. You can always volunteer for the HiFree lunch program, but the People's Potato is also an amazing place to volunteer, or just eating at these places. It really is something spectacular. I know that when I was doing my undergrad and eating at the People's Potato, it was just really nice to see so many people gathering together to get a meal. Other ways are, City Farm School. It's an amazing program that they have, and I did it a few years ago. It really jump-started my knowledge about food systems and about growing food, and ever since I've had a home garden, and it's one of my favorite things to do. There's also so many workshops around at Frigo, at the greenhouse, and so many wonderful organizations to either volunteer at or access services. And I think that like Frigo, greenhouse, People's Potato, those are all really great places to get started and kind of get a footing for what else is out there, to be able to go out to the other organizations that are around.
Wonderful. Is there anything that I haven't asked that you wanted to share with us or that you thought would be important?
I don't think so.
Great. I think we've covered quite a bit. So,
yeah.
So thank you very much for your time.